Hello ladies, and welcome back to Boots Over Heels, a Southern Grace clothing podcast with me, your host, Jade, based here at Southern Grace's headquarters in Carrollton, Texas. This week, I have a story for you, but I wanted to change it up a little and do a meet your host sort of episode and tell you an absolutely true story about my own personal life. This week, I'm going to tell you the story of my love story, and it involves a canceled wedding and the national news. So, let's get started. My love story starts nearly 6 years ago on my first day of college. I was required to take a class at my college called the First Year Experience. It took place every day, and my class was called Arts and Ideas, and it was the single worst class I've ever taken in my entire life. It was terrible. I hated it. It included such glorious subjects like ontology, which, in case you didn't know, of course, is the study of things in relation to other things. Google it, that's what it says. There's also the Verfremdungseffekt, which is so boring I won't even explain it to you, but you get the idea. It was not a very fun class. Well, it was my very first day of college, and I walked to my class, and I was about 5 minutes late because I was lost. But also, let's be real, I'm late to a little bit of everything that I do, at least 5 minutes late to most things that I do. My school is very small, so the classroom was only about the size of maybe like an office, and there was a table, and there was about 12 students seated at this round table, and my teacher was already introducing himself, and I was late, so I sat down, and I was so nervous that my skin started to tingle a little bit, or that's what I was thinking until I looked down, and there was actually this huge like carpenter ant on my arm, and I jumped a little and I brushed it off my arm. And then I felt the same tickling on my shoulder, and there was a second one. There were ants on me, so I brushed that one away. And where did those ants come from? I still don't have any clue how those ants like got on me during that day, but unfortunately everyone else had also noticed my strange fidgeting in the corner. And my teacher asked if I would like to stand in the corner for a second and shake the ants off me. And so I did, and I was just an awkward girl standing in a corner, just brushing ants off my person. I was so embarrassed and mortified because I was like, wow, amazing first impression, right? And eventually I sat back down, and the class kind of passed in a bit of a blur for me. But my husband, though, says that he fell in love with me at first sight, which is so cute, right? He says to this day that no one else has ever caught his attention like me. And he said, I came into class late, and I, at the time, had like pink hair and I was tall, and he thought that as I stood in the corner, like brushing ants off my person, that I was just hilarious. And so, for my part, I honestly didn't notice much after the ants, but I did notice a dark-haired boy sitting next to the teacher who was clacking away at his keyboard as fast as humanly possible, who answered every single question with like an insanely smart answer. And I was like, well, that's the smartest kid in class then. And it wasn't until our midterm that we actually spoke and like had a conversation, because for our midterm, our class had this little study session, and we all came, all 12 of us, we studied for a little while, and he stayed around a little longer than other people till it was just the two of us, and we studied a little longer, and we studied together, and I realized he hated the class as much as I did. Like, he hated it just as much as me. He had procrastinated just as much as me. I was shocked because he was so smart in class and so like confident in class. I thought he had done like all the reading, but nope, he just had procrastinated just as much as I had. And we watched hilarious videos, and we were instant friends. And during that time that we were friends, my now husband, he says that he went home and acquired like a whole new wardrobe because he didn't think he was fashionable enough for me at the time. He also switched out of a class to add into one of mine so that we could spend more time together. It was really cute of him. And it worked pretty well, and we skipped classes to get ice cream, and we went to Sonic all the time for like fun fruity drinks after class, and we often spent like evenings playing in the music rooms, like little piano rooms, because he plays piano. And eventually, as you can probably guess, we started dating. We dated for 4 more years, and in that time we went skydiving, we drove between cities in the summertime, and we even lived in Belfast, Ireland for like 6 months. For a study abroad program, which was pretty fun. And that program was funny actually, because the teachers went on strike for like 6 out of the 11 weeks that we were there for classes. And so we didn't have class for like 6 weeks. So we just traveled a ton, and I got to see places I'd never been before, like London. We went to Poland and Portugal, Italy. We went all around. It was an amazing time, and we did that together. So that was really fun. And eventually we graduated college together, and I made plans to move to Dallas, where he was based. And he lived in about a 2-mile radius next to all of his like close family and friends. And so I decided, I would move to Dallas for him because I'm nice. And before I had finished packing to move to Dallas, my family and I went to New York for the weekend, and I invited my then boyfriend, his name is Austin, to come along. And when I learned that weekend is that I am the least observant person in the world. I could never be a detective. My dad didn't want to make plans, neither did Austin, and he wanted to take, all that I knew was that Austin wanted to take our family to like the Freedom Tower for like lunch or something, and he was very adamant about it, and it was odd, but I really didn't notice it. And on our second day in New York, we went to like this adorable little museum, and then we headed to the Freedom Tower. And for some reason, both my dad and Austin demanded that we spend like a concerningly long amount of time at the 9/11 memorial. So don't get me wrong, it's a very important and moving site. But we came from this like exciting and fun museum, and my brother and I wanted to do the tower, and then we would see the memorial, because to flip-flop from like a really fun, happy museum and then just to be sad was kind of like a harsh transition. And we ended up standing there for like, I don't know, like 45 minutes, like a really long time. Like my dad was like, no, we need to soak it in. Like we need to, we need to like respect this. And we were all like, okay. So we stood there for like 45 minutes, and then we kept standing and no one was saying anything. But we were certainly kind of bummed out at that point. Eventually we went up the Freedom Tower, and at the north corner at exactly noon, my husband and I posed for a picture together, and then he asked me to marry him, and I was absolutely surprised. I had no clue. I was surprised enough that when he pulled out the ring, I actually thought he had found the ring on the floor. And I was like, did you find that on the floor? Like, we have to give that to Lost and Found. Like, that was the first thought in my head, was that like, we have to give it to Lost and Found. You can't just like give me things you find on the floor. But then he said, want to marry me. And I was like, oh, so this is like on purpose. And I still assumed he was kidding. The first response was, are you kidding? Out of my mouth. And then I didn't know how to formally say yes to the proposal. And so I just grabbed the ring awkwardly in my like 2 fingers, because I was like, how does one say like a formal yes? Like, so I just like held it in my fingers for like a while until like he hugged me, and I still just held it in my hand for kind of a long time. So it turns out about a month before, Austin had come to visit me, and he asked my dad if he could marry me. And of course my dad said yes. And then Austin asked if they should tell my mom, and my dad was like, definitely not, which was probably a good call, because my mom's not the best at secrets, which neither am I. That's where I get it from. Sorry, Mom. And then when they made a stand by that memorial for the longest time, we had been waiting for Austin's parents to arrive because they had the ring. They flew from Dallas and surprised us. And then they were running late because their flight had been delayed or canceled or something, and there's a crazy situation of flights, and they literally just made it to the Freedom Tower in time. We were waiting on them to arrive, and they snuck onto the elevators right around when we did, and Austin went to the restroom and got the ring from his dad, and then he came out, and then he proposed to me. So that was the story of why we were waiting at the memorial for like the longest time. I had no clue. I'm the least observant person. I could never be like a detective. I'd be awful at it. And we decided that we would get married in 6 months, because why wait? And I won't bore you with too many wedding details, because let's be honest, who cares about those? All you need to know is that we chose our date to be March 21st, 2020, and we planned a country club wedding with close to 200 guests, and it was going swimmingly. So it was going amazing. We were having the best time planning it. I had all these plans. The weekend before the wedding, we actually threw my husband a surprise bachelor party. I know, what is that? But we tricked him into thinking that we were driving to my parents' hometown to like spend the weekend for my brother's birthday. That was a hard sell, because my brother doesn't really care. But I was suddenly my brother really looked up to Austin, and I was like, it's really important to him that you come with us to that little party on that weekend. And it really was my brother's birthday, but you know, he didn't care. But right near my parents' house, all of his bachelor, friends picked him up and took him off for a bachelor party weekend. And while I hung out with my brother that weekend and he hung out with his friends, things got a bit concerning. So in the lead up to the wedding, we had been hearing about coronavirus or COVID-19, of course, but in typical denial fashion, I was pretty sure everything would be fine and that it wouldn't affect us. But we said goodbye to my husband's friends, and they said they would see us at the wedding in 7 days, and then we drove home. And little did I know that I wouldn't see them in 7 days. In fact, I wouldn't see any of those people again for almost an entire year, because the next day, Dallas went into lockdown, and essentially our wedding was canceled. We decided, no matter what, that we were going to get married. We would get married on the day we had chosen, and we just wanted to be married to each other, honestly. And I also had too many things that were engraved and written down with our wedding date. I really didn't want to change it. My mom had handmade our invitations, and they all said our wedding date on it. And I had a frame specifically for the invitations, and I had a necklace that was engraved with our wedding date. I just wanted to marry him that day. I'd already been waiting 6 months. I wanted to marry him that day, right? So anyway, I had way too much stuff, and we decided, also because we wanted to get married, that we would get married on Saturday, March 21st, 2020, no matter what happened. And that actually turned out to be even harder than we expected it to be. So I'll give you the timeline. So on Monday, friends and family started to tell us from far away that they weren't going to be able to make it anymore. And that night, my in-laws came to our house and told us that our venue had canceled on us as nicely as they could, but they could no longer have us and our wedding happen there. Now, that was kind of a bummer because we were going to have our ceremony and reception in the same place. So we now didn't have a location, which was not great. On Tuesday, we decided to downsize our wedding from that at the country club to 50 people at our rehearsal dinner location instead. We made plans for where the ceremony would be, and the venue promised us that they would be available. And on Wednesday, the rehearsal place canceled on us as well. They also canceled as nicely as they could. I don't blame anybody, but they canceled as well. And that day as well, on Wednesday, my bridal party told me they could no longer come to the bachelorette party, which was supposed to be the night before the wedding, and so that was canceled as well. On Thursday, we planned to get married in my in-laws' backyard with our closest friends and one friend each. My maid of honor let me know that she couldn't make it, and we also canceled our honeymoon the following week because we could no longer leave the country. On Friday, my aunts and my grandmother told me that they wouldn't be able to fly from their homes for the wedding, but my mom, my mother-in-law, and 2 close friends came over for a movie night for an impromptu bachelorette party, which was so sweet of them. On Saturday, a close friend from Dallas risked coming to the wedding to be my single bridesmaid, downsized from a bridal party of 9 people. My parents finagled something old, borrowed, and new and blue for me because my family members were originally supposed to bring down those items, but they weren't able to. So instead, my parents got me a new pair of blue earrings. I borrowed a bracelet from my mom, and on the bracelet, I strung my paternal grandfather's wedding ring. So that was my new, blue, old, and borrowed. My husband's best man arrived, and our officiant arrived. They were still able to make it. And including our close family members, our guest list was about 10 people total. We still had all the flowers from our big wedding because we couldn't cancel that. So every single service in the backyard was just covered in flowers. We originally had 2 cakes for the event, but our bakery was actually very sweet, and they melded our 2 cakes into one small cake that was large enough for a little over 10 guests, which was so nice of them. We got married in a small ceremony, and we filmed a Facebook Live for everyone who couldn't make it. And I loved our ceremony and our wedding day so much. Our bridal and groom's parties sent us videos wishing us the best. We catered amazing food, and our 10 guests danced their little heart out to the playlist my husband made. I also really surprised my husband during our first look by dressing his best man in a wedding dress and putting him there instead of me, which was hilarious. Those are great pictures. The most surprising part about the entire day, though, was when we went outside after the ceremony to take pictures, we heard honking, And as we walked closer to the street, a parade of cars was slowly driving down the street, and there were probably like over 100 cars. I don't know, I'm not good at estimating that, but it went on for a long time. That's what it felt like to me. It felt like over 100 cars. And there were some people that went by multiple times to wave at us. People held up signs, they shot confetti, they threw balloons at us. And while we were standing there, we got interviewed by the local Dallas news. And days later, we were interviewed and we were on the national news as like a heartwarming story. So that was pretty cool. It was an absolutely crazy time. My husband started to work from home, and for the first year of our marriage, we worked at home together every day, and it was like an extended honeymoon. We got a cat, and we made ourselves a little busy inside, you know. And that's not even the end of the story. On our 1-year anniversary, we went to my in-laws' house for a celebratory dinner. They were like, hey, it's your 1-year anniversary, like join us for food. And when we arrived, I realized my maid of honor had driven 7 hours to join us for dinner. And then my husband's best man arrived from a 6-hour drive away. Our friends from Dallas arrived, people I hadn't seen in almost a year. We had friends drive from Oklahoma. Our grandparents came, our family members, and more all arrived. They all showed up for this anniversary party. To surprise us, my mom made a replica wedding cake that was really close, like to the flavors of our original wedding cake. There was a DJ, there was food. It was one of the kindest, most overwhelming surprises, and it was amazing to see all of our friends all in one place. And even more amazing that they went so far out of their way to celebrate with us like a year later, like a year after the fact. Our honeymoon is still scheduled for later this year, so that will be fun too. Almost 2 years later, I'll eventually be able to go on our honeymoon to Costa Rica, so that'll be fun. And that's the end of my little love story so far. I wanted to tell you a personal story this week so that you could get to know me better, and also because while we have a lot of dramatic story times, it's fun to include my own, and this was pretty crazy in my opinion at least, and although I might be a bit biased, but I don't think so. Probably not. I personally love my love story and our wedding story because while at the time there were some mixed emotions, of course, it's emotional when, you know, friends and family have to cancel on you and you know, you have to cancel all the plans you've been looking forward to. At the end of the day, it was still an amazing time, and now I think it's such a fun and interesting story to tell. Like, I know people, you know, you get married and it's adorable and amazing, but we have this really crazy story where everything went wrong and we got married anyway, and we were on the news and all of our friends tried so hard to make it special for us. It's actually kind of serendipitous too, because when we started dating seriously, I always pictured to myself that we would get married in my in-laws' backyard because they had this gorgeous backyard, and I always thought we would have like a small, affordable wedding. And then when my husband and I got engaged, he was like, we should have a big party. And I was like, well, I'm not gonna say no to a big party. Like, who doesn't want a big party? So we planned a big party, but we still ended up having the wedding that I had always pictured in the backyard of his parents, which was pretty funny. And sure, it was different than we expected, but I wouldn't change it. I got to do whatever I wanted that day, which was pretty cool. I got to marry my best friend, and the pandemic got in the way of a lot of stuff. And I'm definitely not the only person out there whose plans or wedding was crazied up. But I prefer to try and look on the bright side of things, and I have a fun story out of it. And I mean, instead of having to talk to each and every one of my guests that day, I mean, there was 200. I got to eat cake totally uninterrupted with my dad and my brother. And that was pretty awesome, you know, it's the little things. Anyway, ladies, I hope that you were able to come out of 2020 with at least one good experience, and that one is most definitely mine. Try to think of one of your best experiences, and why don't you let me know what it is on our social media, and I would be so interested in reading your stories about what happened to you in 2020. Also, I will post some pictures from my husband and I's engagement and wedding day and all that jazz on our social media at 7grace1, the number, so that you guys can see it, and there'll be more on our YouTube as well if you're interested. Thank you so much for listening, ladies. Please subscribe and review to the show, and I'll see you next Thursday on Boots Over Heels, the podcast where we understand Southern women because we are Southern women.